guys, welcome back. So today I'm going to talk about some piano processing techniques, and I'm just going to play you a little bit of a track to show you what you can do with just piano and some Ableton plugins. If you have any tips on how to process piano or things that you like to do for whatever genre of music you make, please share it in the comments below. I love to read them and learn from you guys as well. If you are new to this topic, chances are every time you use the piano, it sounds thin, you're not able to get it to sustain properly or cut through the mix, and it just frankly doesn't sound as good as the real thing. So I'm going to take you through my 4-point thought process that got me from taking a very simple piano idea and turning it into this quite cinematic sounding track. First of all, we need to start with the piano, and contrary to what many might think, you don't need the most expensive piano. To prove this, I'm just gonna go with free pianos. There's a grand piano in Ableton's core library. There we go. I'm just gonna use the MIDI up here just to save some time. This is just a basic arpeggiated piano line. For me, this already sounds far too hard. This might work in like an EDM banger where you've got lots of or something like that, and you really need it to cut through the mix. But for this style of music that I'm writing, it's far more gentle and soft, and so I'm gonna just start with the basic grand piano controls before I add processing. I mean, there's no reason for me to overload my computer, which already is deciding to do a lot with very little. Okay, so I'm gonna take the hardness down. In fact, I'm gonna loop this, so I'm gonna click on this clip, hit Command L, just to loop it over here. So this is my loop brace, and you can see that loop is checked. And I'm just going to play it while I adjust my controls. So that's already sounding a lot gentler, and I can work with this. Now, I don't really feel like this piano is lacking in body, but many pianos do lack in body, and for that I highly recommend Ableton's saturator or some kind of distortion or overdrive. So I often use a saturator with a piano or even things like marimbas, generally pitched percussive instruments. If you want them to have a little bit more body or sustain, you can start with a saturator to bring out the attack and also accentuate many of the harmonics for the sustaining part of the note. So you can put the drive a little bit. I think soft sine is fine. I like to turn the bass down so that it doesn't impact or distort the bass frequencies too much. If you're liking the sound of the drive, but you don't want it to get so loud, you can also balance out whatever drive parameter you have here with the output parameter. So if I want a distorted sound, but I don't want it to clip over here, I'm just going to turn down my output. That's just an extreme example. Another thing I really like to do is add reverb to my piano to give it a bit of a spacious feel, but I also like to really pump that reverb and give it some body. So let's add some reverb and I'll show you what I mean. If I turn this knob all the way to the wet side, then naturally the piano loses a lot of power. It also sounds super wonky, that's because chorus is on and all these other things. Now I'm going to add some multi-band dynamics and apply upward compression. Can you hear how the reverb tail has so much more body now? And if you really want to push it, you can play with these controls and apply some compression at the top. Now, one thing we didn't do early on is EQ the piano, which if you are EQing quite heavily, it's going to make far more sense to put the EQ before the saturator and maybe even after the saturator, so that the reverb doesn't really take those frequencies into account. You can really EQ at any stage, but if there are harsh frequencies that you want to cut, I suggest doing it as early as possible, maybe even inside the instrument. Yeah, as you can see, there's quite an interesting EQ going on in here, so I could actually EQ my basic instrument over here. So once you have the tone and you've got the body and you've got the tail that you're after, you can start layering things. I'm going to use another piano here. In fact, I love this piano and it's free. It's from Spitfire Audio and it's called Soft Piano, and it's such a gorgeous piano. I use it all the time. I just love the felt soft sound. You can change the reverb. You can change the hardness, the velocity. So let's now go back to this original audio. You can see I've layered quite a lot. I've got a labs piano here with the mids upward and downward compressed, a whole bunch of other stuff. I've got another labs piano here just with compression, but it's got a send to the reverb, which gives it a different sound. Let's sample that. Very much in the background compared to this, which is the melody, so it's got a lot more body. Let's listen to this layer. So if you really want to go overboard with the layering, I suggest you subdivide the piano into 3 sections. You've got your mid-range, where I've used these chords. I've used a lot of labs pianos and this bit of a pad as well. You've got your upper register, where I added a bit of shimmer, some glock, some wide processing. What I often do is I pan the piano. Got a little bit of high end on the left, a little bit on the right, another layer, almost like a glockenspiel, just to give it a bit of a shimmer and to give it a wider feel. And then also your low end. I often find that piano is a little bit weak in the bass when you're producing a big track. So I added a sine wave down here. Call it a sub, I guess. I also doubled the bass line over here. And if you really want the bass to slap you in the chest, Who slaps anyone in the chest? Then you could make the bass mono. Here I've gone for a bigger, wider sound. Another thing I love to layer with piano in the bottom end is a double bass, a pitched double bass. Sounds so gorgeous. Now let's also talk about texture. To oversimplify, what I've done here is I've created 2 layers, a dry layer with nothing extra and a wet layer. And essentially, I have effects that I only want in the distance. You can hear how it kind of comes in. And that just adds to the space and the texture. I can add some really fun effects to the reverb. Now that doesn't sound so great, but if I create this chain and I've got a wet layer and a dry layer, and here it sounds far more interesting. And you can really use that to also add this feeling of nostalgia to your music, or if you're doing lo-fi music, that can help. Another way you can add texture is purely just to add a field recording. So I've added some birds, as you can hear. If I wanted to have a less pure melody, I could simply just swap out pianos and create a very different feel. If you're interested in this little experimental piano I made, you can get it on my website. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you will know that next week I'm starting a beat challenge. If you're interested in following along, either joining me on the challenge or checking out what I come up with every day, follow me on Instagram. If you learned something in this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps other people discover these videos so that they can also learn these tricks. And of course that my channel can grow and then I can make more of these videos because I can get compensated for it. Thank you so much for being part of this channel and making it a fun place to be. Have a lovely week ahead and I'll see you guys soon in the next one.